If you're like me, you love a good single-player video game, and as it turns out, the release schedule for the second half of 2021 is actually pretty stacked with exciting single-player experiences. In fact, it was hard to limit this list to just 30 games. Now, some games on this list do feature a co-op or a multiplayer component, but all of them, with perhaps one or two exceptions, are first and foremost games that you can enjoy by yourself if that's how you prefer to play. And with that out of the way, I hope you'll join me as I look at 30 games that are scheduled to release in the second half of 2021. As the Swan Song for the Nintendo Wii back in 2011, Skyward Sword's reliance on motion controls wasn't exactly a hit with everyone. Thankfully, Skyward Sword HD for the Nintendo Switch adds a button-only option if you prefer it, or if you're playing on a Switch Lite. That said, if you want the authentic Skyward Sword experience, you can still use the Joy-Con's motion controls to swing your sword, raise your shield, throw bombs, and draw your bow and arrow. While Skyward Sword may not invoke the sense of grandeur that Twilight Princess did for so many, this is still a great game, especially for players who miss those old-school Zelda dungeons, which we'll now get to see for the first time in HD. On the downside, Nintendo has blocked the new fast travel mechanic behind a paywall. Basically, you can now fast travel from any point in the world, including from inside dungeons, to the game's hub in the sky and back again. But you can only do this using the game's associated Loftwing Amiibo, which is expensive and almost guaranteed to sell out everywhere. Not cool, Nintendo. Like, super not cool. Before anyone calls me out, yes, I know this game is already on PC. But if you don't have a pretty beefy gaming rig, then your best bet is to play Microsoft Flight Simulator on Xbox Series X or S when it gets a proper console release on July 27th. According to a post on the official Xbox blog, the game world will feature over 37,000 airports, 2 million cities, 1.5 billion buildings, real mountain ranges, roads, trees, rivers, animals, traffic, and more. What makes all that so exciting is that these areas are depicted in what must be the most photorealistic video game graphics ever. However, one question I have is, how will such an in-depth experience, one that's typically enjoyed with a keyboard, translate to console? Microsoft does promise that the console version will provide the same amount of depth as the PC version, so we can only hope that they've managed to maintain an experience worthy of the Flight Simulator name. I know what you're saying. Isn't the Ascent a co-op game? Well, Xbox describes the game as a, quote, solo and co-op action RPG set in a cyberpunk world. So while many players will play the Ascent with friends, you can play it alone, and since July is a relatively quiet month, it makes the list. Gameplay-wise, the Ascent brings twin-stick shooting combat into the world of a top-down RPG. To accommodate this, the world is surprisingly three-dimensional for a top-down game. In addition to destructible environments, there's a cover system that allows you to use the world to your advantage, and an aiming system which allows you to target enemies down low or up high if you want to do more damage. On the RPG side of things, you can take on quests, and it seems like the game is leaning heavily on character customization. According to the game's official page on Xbox.com, you'll, quote, customize your character with cyberware that suits your playstyle, allocate new skill points as you level up, and try various augmentations to take down your enemies in new and creative ways. We're now getting into August, where things heat up with some of the most promising indie games in recent memory, kicking off with 12 Minutes on August 19th. The game drops you into a time loop that begins with you sitting down for a romantic dinner with your wife. Unfortunately, things go to hell when a man breaks into your apartment, accuses your wife of murder, then kills you. After you die, you find yourself right back at the beginning, and it's up to you to make different decisions so things play out differently. Mechanically, it looks like 12 Minutes works a bit like a point-and-click adventure. You can walk around your apartment, talk to your wife, pick up and combine certain items, and interact with parts of the environment to trigger certain events. Trigger the right events, and maybe you'll not only survive, but unravel the mystery of why this man is here to destroy your life. The game also has an amazing cast featuring the voices of Willem Dafoe, Daisy Ridley, and James McAvoy. Next up is Kena Bridge of Spirits, a third-person action-adventure that seems to combine the exploration elements of Zelda with some puzzle-solving elements reminiscent of Pikmin. The game features a hub world that branches off into separate levels, where you'll cleanse corrupted spirits by helping them resolve their unfinished business. You'll solve puzzles, take on quests, complete traversal challenges, and defeat some pretty intimidating bosses. But what really makes Kena stand out is that you'll do all this with the help of your furry little friends called the Rot. You'll collect the Rot one by one throughout the world, and they'll then assist you in both defeating enemies and solving puzzles. There's a lot more going on in Bridge of Spirits, so check out my preview for the game if you're interested. Kena releases on PS4, PS5, and PC on August 24th. Psychonauts 2 is a 3D platforming game where you play Raz, who's both an acrobat, which makes him an expert platformer, and a psychic, which allows him to join a group of psychic spies known as the Psychonauts. It's thanks to the Psychonauts that Raz is literally able to enter people's brains, which is where you'll spend most of your time in Psychonauts because each level takes place in someone's mind. This allows for some truly surreal environments. In one brain, you'll explore a casino-themed hospital, and in another, the mind of an amateur dentist, you'll be jumping from one crooked tooth to the next. The game also features a large overworld with secrets of its own to uncover, and you'll unlock all sorts of psychic abilities that help with both exploration and combat. If you like platformers or just weird stuff, you'll be able to play Psychonauts 2 on Xbox and PC on August 25th, with a PlayStation release coming sometime later. Not unlike Psychonauts 2, No More Heroes 3 is both quirky and it's been a long time coming. If you're not familiar, No More Heroes 1 and 2 released for the Nintendo Wii and are two of the most irreverent hack-and-slash video games of all time. In Part 3, you'll once again play as Travis Touchdown, and you'll use your trusty beam katana, this game's version of a lightsaber, a mech suit, and a set of 12 wrestling moves to take on an army of alien assassins. If you can't tell, this game does not take itself seriously. I mean, this is a series where you save your game by visiting the toilet to take a crap. But I digress. In addition to the hack-and-slash combat, you'll also have some sort of death glove that lets you unlock certain skills via a skill tree, and if I'm reading the game's official site correctly, there will also be a lawn mowing minigame and you'll get to wrestle alligators. If you're looking for an off-the-wall brawler full of jokes, Easter eggs, and that probably doesn't care whether you like it or not, check out No More Heroes 3 on Nintendo Switch this August 27th. In the next game in Square Enix's flagship narrative adventure series, you explore the mountain Colorado town of Haven Springs as Alex, who has the psychic and empathetic ability to literally feel other people's emotions. She can even see these emotions in the form of brightly colored auras, and while she views this ability as a curse, it's going to help her throughout the story of the game. That's because Alex is searching Haven Springs for the truth behind her brother's mysterious death. It's easy to imagine how experiencing the feelings of others, whether it be fear, hate, sorrow, love, or anger, might help her unravel the mystery, especially if certain people have something to hide. But things might get dangerous for Alex because not only can she see and feel the emotions of others, she can even absorb them, which might have unpredictable effects. As you might imagine, the game also features many dialogue choices that can drastically change the lives of certain characters. If you're itching for another winding, narrative adventure with a supernatural twist, True Colors is set to release on September 10th. Also releasing on September 10th is the next game in the long-running Tales of series of action RPGs from Bandai Namco. The most notable, or at least the most apparent new feature in Arise, is the visual upgrade. This is the first game in the series to be built using Unreal Engine 4 instead of the developer's proprietary engine, and I gotta say, it looks beautiful. Gameplay-wise, it sounds like Arise is keeping the series' tried and tested battle system known as the Linear Motion Battle System, but the devs are making some updates so gameplay is faster paced and more strategic. For example, there won't be any victory scenes after you win a battle, and there's a heavy emphasis on a new dodge mechanic. As for exploration and the setting of the game, not a lot of details have been shared, but we do know the story will span at least 2 planets and you'll likely get to visit both. If you're looking to scratch your action RPG itch, Tales of Arise might be your best bet in 2021. Developed by the studio behind the shamefully underplayed Dishonored games, Deathloop puts you in the shoes of Colt Vaughn, an ex-military badass who's stuck in a 24-hour time loop. To break the loop, you have to assassinate 8 targets that are scattered across an island. Problem is, given the schedule of these targets, there's literally not enough time in the day to assassinate them all before the clock resets. This sets up what the developers call a murder puzzle, where you have to explore the game's 4 massive levels, each one its own open world, to discover new ways to kill all of your marks in less and less time. For example, maybe you figure out just the right levers to pull, metaphorically speaking, in order to get 2 of your targets in the same room at the same time, allowing you to get 2 kills for the price of 1. Of course, everyone on the island is trying to stop you. Thankfully, you have a ton of firepower and you'll discover a bunch of supernatural abilities along the way, many of which are taken straight from the Dishonored games. This is easily one of my most anticipated games of the year, and it releases on PS5 and PC on September 14th. As a huge fan of stealth games, I had to put Aragami 2 on this list. Now, the developers are really pushing the 3-player co-op mode, but if Aragami 2 is anything like the first game, it should still be a blast to play solo. If you didn't play the original, it's as if someone made a modern version of Tenchu, then mixed in a little bit of Thief and added supernatural abilities similar to those from Dishonored. For example, your teleport ability is pretty much the same as Dishonored's Blink ability. But unlike Dishonored, Aragami forces you to stay in the shadows because staying in the light drains you of any ability to use your magic. The game will feature a revamped skill tree, and your playstyle will determine which skills you'll want to unlock. Some abilities include the teleport that I already mentioned, invisibility, and a brand new double jump. You'll also be able to hang on to ledges, which I don't think was in the original, and should lead to some better stealth. And while brutal stealth kills are always encouraged in Aragami, it does look like face-to-face combat is getting an overhaul as well, such that encounters might not end quite as quickly as they did in Part 1. I just hope the game rewards you like the first one did for either ghosting levels or killing everyone. The choice was always yours, and it was nice to get a pat on the back no matter which route you took. Fingers crossed. In Lost Judgment, a direct sequel to 2018's Judgment, you'll once again take control of Detective Takayuki Yagami as he works to solve a very peculiar murder mystery. See, the prime suspect in this case was caught on camera committing yet another, less serious crime at the exact same time as the murder, so he obviously didn't do it. Or did he? It's a clever story, and as you solve the mystery, you can expect to explore new areas, including a school where you'll apparently go undercover. Of course, this being a detective story, the investigative elements of Judgment will make a return, and this being a game in the Yakuza universe, it will also feature quirky side content and minigames. The real-time combat system based on multiple fighting styles also makes a return, and according to an article on Inverse.com, it features an entirely new style that focuses on parrying and disarming enemies. If you like the original, it sounds like Lost Judgment will give you more to love when it releases on September 24th for current and previous gen PlayStation and Xbox consoles. It might be a stretch to put Hot Wheels Unleashed on a list of single-player experiences, as racing games are typically pretty multiplayer focused. That said, if this game allows me to relive my childhood Hot Wheels memories, I won't be able to resist racing through its career mode when it releases on September 30th. As for tracks, Unleashed will feature 6 different environments, ranging from a garage to a college campus to a skyscraper, and each environment will feature multiple courses for a total of 40, yes, 40 different tracks in all. Each one is made largely of these curvy plastic sections and these magnetic sections which allow you to race on walls and even upside down. Of course, tracks will also feature sections made from parts of the environment like countertops and vents, and you'll run into obstacles like fans that can blow you off the track, or this tricky and sticky spider. As the cherry on top, Unleashed will also feature a track editor which basically turns the game into the ultimate Hot Wheels playground. Oh, and I didn't even mention the car models, which look amazing. While Far Cry 6 doesn't seem to be straying too far from the traditional Far Cry formula, the game is doing some new things that look to make this a worthwhile experience. This time you take the role of Danny, a much more fleshed out character than we've seen in recent Far Cry games. The story involves taking down the oppressive dictator ruling her home nation, the Caribbean island of Yara. As such, you'll explore beaches, jungles, and for the first time in a Far Cry game, a full-on capital city. Also new in Far Cry 6 are the new styles of guerrilla combat, warfare, and stealth. You'll be able to craft and modify all sorts of crazy homemade weapons, including, for example, a lethal CD launcher, and the new Supremo backpacks, which allow you to, among other things, fire mortars from your back to rain down on distant foes. You can also holster your weapon for the first time in a Far Cry game, which allows you to hide in plain sight. Then there are guerrilla paths, tunnels and secret routes throughout the island that let you bypass the oppressive military. And finally, let's not forget Chorizo, one of the game's amigos for hire. He's a sausage dog that you can use to distract enemies as you sneak up behind them and, yeah, let's just pretend Chorizo didn't see that. Super Metroid is one of my favorite games of all time, so I couldn't be happier that we're getting a new 2D Metroid that promises to conclude the storyline between Samus and the Metroids. Gameplay-wise, expect Metroid's trademark brand of exploration where you'll discover alien weapons and abilities that enable you to reach new areas and defeat new enemies. However, unlike previous Metroid games, Metroid Dread puts you under constant threat of being brutally killed by what are known as EMMI robots. There are 7 of them stalking you, and they're impervious to Samus's blasters and missiles, so until you find a way to take them out, you'll have to use evasion and stealth to avoid certain death. As for new mechanics, Samus will have a wall hang ability that allows her to attack while sticking to specific blue surfaces, and she'll have an improved free aim ability that allows her to aim while moving. Lastly, a new dash will allow her to sneak through narrow gaps without stopping. As for old mechanics, as long as we can eventually unlock the screw attack, I'm good. If there's one upcoming AAA game that I'm pretty concerned about, it's Guardians of the Galaxy. My biggest worry is that the combat we saw, well, to me it just looked a little too shallow to carry a full single-player experience. The game puts you in control of Star-Lord as you punch and shoot your way through all manner of alien lifeforms, but you can use the 4 face buttons to issue commands to the 4 other Guardians. This might mix things up, but the combat system still looked a tad, for lack of a better term, button mashy, at least to me. However, what impressed me about Guardians is how it seems to nail the humor and tone of the franchise. For example, one of Star-Lord's special moves involves him pulling out his Walkman so he can blast some classic 80s rock to pump up his fellow comrades. There was also a surprising number of pretty hilarious dialogue options. In fact, the gameplay demo emphasized dialogue so much that it seemed to me like parts of this game, at least the parts where you're not fighting, might feel more like a narrative-based adventure than a typical action game. And that's actually good news, because if the writing holds up, it could be the dialogue that keeps me interested. Guardians of the Galaxy releases for PC, Xbox, and PlayStation on October 26th, with a simultaneous streaming release planned for Switch. If we're not counting Elden Ring, Forza Horizon 5 is my game of the show for E3 2021. If you've never played a Forza Horizon game, these aren't just some of the best racing games around, they're some of the best open world games around. With Forza Horizon 5, we're racing through Mexico, and with ray tracing on the Xbox Series S and X, plus a level of detail that literally goes down to the last needle on each desert cactus, the environments in this game look absolutely glorious. And given that this is the largest Forza Horizon game to date, expect to discover a ton of diverse locations as you complete races, take on different driving challenges, and just explore to your heart's content. You'll race along beaches and through jungles, you'll discover ancient ruins and towns, and I'm hoping for a metropolis or two. Oh, and did I mention the active volcano? Finally, Horizon 5 will feature what I think is best described as a minigame editor called Events Lab. You'll be able to create your very own races, minigames, and other events that you and your friends can play together in co-op or competitively. And yes, while the base game will also be playable with friends, trust me when I say that the Horizon games are a total blast to play solo. If I have one blind spot in gaming, it's traditional JRPGs, so I had to do some research on Shin Megami Tensei 5. Here's what I know. You play as a high school student in Tokyo who gets pulled into a post-apocalyptic alternate dimension where Tokyo is now a desolate and destroyed wasteland. It's also been overtaken by demons. Fortunately, you quickly learn to fight demons, and while exploration will be a part of the game, it's the combat where things get deep. You have to exploit enemy weak points, and doing so will increase the amount of actions you can perform in a combo. You can also recruit demons via a negotiation system. Successfully negotiate and your once foe will then fight alongside you. You can also fuse demons with one another to create even more powerful allies. As you grow your collection of demons, you can then level them up as you find those that suit your playstyle most. There's surely a lot more to this game, and fans of the series will be able to experience it all for themselves on Nintendo Switch this November 12th. Switch owners get another RPG to sink their teeth into on November 19th when Nintendo releases Pokémon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. While Pokémon remakes are nothing new, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are the first to be remade from the ground up for the Nintendo Switch. You'll explore, or rather re-explore, the popular Sinnoh region, and while this may not be the graphical overhaul that many people had hoped for, the faithful recreation of this region should get the nostalgia flowing. Plus, the game's official page says players can expect, quote, player-friendly conveniences of the modern Pokémon series, plus up-close and personal Pokémon battle scenes. I haven't played a Pokémon game since Gold and Silver, so I'm not the expert to go into more detail, but I do hope these remakes deliver for longtime fans and new Pokémon players. Dying Light 2 is one of the most ambitious open-world games set to release this year. Taking place 20 years after the events of the first game, it's fair to expect an open world that's even more bleak than the original. Not to mention, it's literally 4 times bigger. But what's really exciting is how dynamic the open world promises to be. As we saw in the original 2019 gameplay demo, certain decisions will have major consequences. For example, you can take sides with certain factions. In one case, you can decide to provide a faction with drinking water, but doing so requires breaking a dam, which consequently opens up an entirely new area of the map. Also, the day-night cycle will have even more of an impact than in the first game. While the city will get more dangerous at night as the infected take to the street, that's also when they leave their nests, which can be plundered for particularly valuable loot. So do you stay safe on the rooftops or risk invading a nest while it's empty? The choice is yours. Finally, the game's parkour is back and hopefully better than ever. Yes, multiplayer is a huge part of the Halo experience, and while we finally got a good look at multiplayer at the recent Xbox E3 showcase, it's the campaign in Halo Infinite that has me most intrigued. Based on what we've seen, it appears 343 Industries hopes to modernize the franchise while also keeping things familiar and nostalgic. For the first time ever, we know the campaign will feature open-world environments. You could explore objectives off the beaten path or stick to the main story, and Joseph Staten, who now serves as creative director on Halo Infinite, said this is the most vertical of any Halo yet. That should come as no surprise given that one of the new traversal mechanics is a grappling hook. While Xbox surprisingly didn't reveal a hard release date for Halo Infinite, Phil Spencer has reiterated that the game is on track for a holiday 2021 release, and he basically confirmed they haven't set a specific date because they want to avoid going head-to-head with Call of Duty. Given Microsoft's goal to release this holiday, I'd expect a launch date in November with a slight chance the game could come out in December. We finally got to see gameplay of Horizon Forbidden West at PlayStation's recent State of Play event, and some of the additions looked pretty cool. For one, exploration looks to be way more fluid. Taking a nod from Breath of the Wild, you'll have what's called a shield wing to glide around with. You'll also have the pullcaster, which is basically a hookshot. Also, whereas the first game only had very specific routes that Aloy could climb with her bare hands, the world of Forbidden West is littered with points that she can grab a hold of, making climbing a much more free-form affair. There will also be much more underwater exploration, which will be made easier by this breathing device, which presumably lets Aloy stay submerged indefinitely. Finally, you can expect new locations to explore, such as San Francisco, and there will be, of course, new machines to fight. Sony has said that the game is on track for a 2021 launch, but given that development has straddled the pandemic, I would absolutely understand if it gets pushed to 2022. Either way, I just want to play it when it's ready. So outside of Halo and Horizon, those are all the games that have specific release dates in 2021. So what about the rest? Well, there are more than a few games that haven't committed to a date, so without further ado, here are 8 more games that, if they hit their launch window, should release in 2021. And there you have it. Those are 30 of the most exciting single-player games set to release in the second half of 2021. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll drop a thumbs up or even share it with a friend. If you want more content just like this, consider subscribing, and if you want to keep up with me and see what I'm playing, you can follow me on Twitter at QuestModeGames. And with that, I want to remind everyone to never stop questing.